control. Gravity is all that I know. She's over me. She's over me. She comes with her hypnotic dance. She holds me here with only a glance. She's over me. She's over me.
Frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Friday edition of the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and as always, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here doing the show for you guys out there. We got a great show lined up for you guys tonight. I hope you're ready for some amazing discussion, some maybe disturbing discussion too. We'll see where this goes. But tonight we're going to be talking about the dark side of Bigfoot. But I'm not going to be doing it alone, ladies and gentlemen. I brought one of the pros with me tonight, and I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Duke Sullivan of World Bigfoot Radio. Welcome to the show, Duke.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you,
again,
brother.
And Big Sky, howdy, and welcome to everybody out there that's listening in.
Oh, absolutely, brother. So, I know things have been busy. You've been working real hard on the World Bigfoot Radio. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a new episode out from just today that broke, and it's amazing. So if you get a chance, please head over to youtube.com youtube.com. Look for Brian Sullivan, and that's Duke, and it's his channel, and that's where you'll find the World Bigfoot Radio shows, and they are absolutely epic. Not only are they in-depth, full of amazing discussion and facts, but they're also Duke always works way over time compiling just a whole catalog of images to show along with the dialogue. So it's really a great experience, and he does a great job with it. That was an amazing episode, brother.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm glad you liked it. I had a lot of fun with it, and it's always fun to have Blaine on. He's got a good sense of humor, and he doesn't mind poking the fun at himself, as you guys will know when you watch the beginning of the show.
Yeah, it was really clever. But so tonight we're going to be talking about the dark side of Bigfoot. And now, a lot of people, there seems to be this prevailing theory with a lot of people, Duke, that they think that these beings, and I can't say whether they are or not, but they believe these beings are the gentle giants, kind of the sentinels, kind of the Harry and the Hendersons, and just looking for a good friend to come and offer them peanut butter and other goodies. And the part about that truly terrifies me is that if they're wrong, they're all kinds of wrong,
Yep. Yeah, I got to agree with you there. I think the people that think that Bigfoot is a friendly forest giant are equally as wrong as people that think that it's a savage killer monster.
Right. And I would agree with that too. I mean, I certainly don't mean to imply through the course of the show that, they're not nice at all and you should avoid them at all costs and stuff. But the part that really concerns me is, there's a practice, and of course, Duke, you're very well aware of this, and many others of you out there are probably very familiar with this term, but it's a process of habituating. And I've just heard so many horror stories that go along with that practice. And if you're not familiar with the term, ladies and gentlemen, habituating is the practice of gifting items. Some people gift food. They gift, balls, toys, little stuffed animals, just all kinds of stuff. I don't think the objects are probably as risky, but I think when you introduce food, that's when it can really go wrong. What are your thoughts on this, Duke?
I totally agree with you. I think that's a really bad idea. And, I always like to liken it to, well, what is habituation with food? You're going out and you're giving them food in the hopes that they'll start liking you because you're giving them food and they'll get closer. Mm-hmm. And that's how you're habituating them. Well, what's the difference between that and habituating a grizzly bear? If you're feeding a grizzly bear all the time, are you going to expect the grizzly bear is now your friend and you don't have to worry about him attacking you ever?
Yeah, exactly.
So, being that we know less about these things than we do about grizzly bears, and you probably wouldn't habituate a grizzly bear, you really shouldn't habituate these guys. And just on that note, the next guest that I got coming on the show actually was in a situation where he was just getting started. He had just seen a Bigfoot not very long before, and he figured out where there was some, and he was going down camping in this area all the time, and he was giving them food. And one time he went down there camping, I guess to do some fishing or something, and didn't bring any extra food with him. And they got a little bit upset about that and started shaking the trailer he was in. To the point where his dog was terrified. He had his shotgun out, and he was freaking out. The trailer was rocking back and forth. He actually called the police to come save him. There's a 911 call of that. We'll have that on the next show, too. But here's a prime example. He didn't know very much about Bigfoot or anything. He was just getting involved in it. He was looking at some of the channels on YouTube. Unfortunately, took some bad advice on one of them and decided he'd do the same thing they were doing and try and feed them to get them to come closer and be more friendlier and stuff, and it didn't work out well. So now he's on the other side of the spectrum, absolutely saying, no, don't feed them. And if you think about it, they're good at making a living. I mean, they made it through, all their life up to the point where you actually decided to go feed one of them. What were they eating then? So they can make a living. They don't need you to feed them. And if you want to habituate them at all, I think the only safe way to do it is a Jane Goodall approach, habituate to presence. Just go be where they're at all the time, to the point where they get past there's an annoying human and you just become part of the background. And then after that, maybe, you're doing something in the area that they like, so you become an asset to having you in the area. And I've done this. I went and camped in an area for about 2.5, 3 months where they were active all the time. And they got really close to, my tent, 30 feet away.
Oh, man.
For sure. And, and the particular one that was about 30 feet away, I was awake and right there when he was about 30 feet away messing around. I could hear him, smell him. Boy, did he stink. He smelled like a rotting meat locker. But point here being that I wasn't like gifting them or anything all the time. I was just in their area. I was sort of trying to not bother them as much as I could and just be a blip on the radar, basically. Mostly I was there at night. Sometimes during the day I'd be gone most of the day, and then I'd be back up there at night. But it wasn't like, well, you're in our area all the time. We'll put up with you. Let's be friends. Let's come visit your camp. No, they weren't really doing that either. So I think sort of one of the best responses that we can expect from them basically is indifference. Let's face it, if they liked humans, they wanted to be our friends, they'd be like trying to contact us maybe, or trying to make some kind of a link with us or something. Clearly they don't want to have anything to do with us.
Right.
And they prefer to just be left alone. So I think indifference is probably one of the best responses you could get from them.
And I think that's true, and that's a really good point. It's not like they need us to survive and to propagate. They've been doing it for time immemorial, however long they've been around, and of course we don't know for sure, but they've been here. They've been scrubbing a living out of the the most inhospitable terrain known to man, and they've been thriving that way, or at least maintaining. And to think that somehow we're going to change that paradigm and we're going to tame them or make them a part of our world, first of all, that whole idea just scares the hell out of me, because like anything, they have chosen our absence. They've chosen to be away from us, like you mentioned. And as soon as we start encroaching on that and pushing at that, will we get that more the more aggressive response then. Whereas right now it's, let's avoid them. They're just kind of indifferent to a point where they don't seek us out. They don't look for that connection. But if we start pushing towards them, and will we get a more aggressive response? Like, no, get the hell out.
Yeah. Well, and that's why part of the habituation thing, they're relying on giving them food that they can't get in the wild that hopefully they'll become addicted to, and then they'll be your friend because they want another Snickers bar.
Yeah.
And, man, if you're going to give them anything, don't give them sweets. First of all, you want a hyperactive sugar junkie Bigfoot running around the woods? That's probably a bad idea. And secondly, they don't have a dentist or any toothbrush. And what happens when their teeth start rotting and they can't make a living anymore?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, so you're probably, those people are probably crippling them on so many different levels, and I had never even thought of the tooth decay, but you're right. I mean, our processed foods are brutal on our own teeth, even with toothbrushes, toothpaste, and dentist visits. Still we have trouble with it. So in a being that subsists on the wild, that would just be murder on their teeth.
Well, yeah, and here's another parallel. Let's go back to bears. What happens to old bears when their teeth start falling apart?
I think
that's
die.
When they become dangerous. They're they're digging in your garbage cans. They're eating roadkill. They're like maybe not that good at catching prey anymore. They're really huge, but they're getting old. Their teeth are falling apart. Hey, look, a lone human walking around the woods without a gun.
Yeah.
Easy meal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point too. Wow. So, do you think that potentially very misguided habituation attempts may be at the root of some of these negative Sasquatch encounters where, when we're discussing the dark side of Bigfoot, could they be as a result of this kind of interactions?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I mean, we've got, quite a few reports of that sort of thing happening where people started habituating with good intentions and the whole thing just turned into a horrible nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's really no doubt about that one, not in my mind anyway. I just think it's, if you're going to habituate them at all, just habituate to presence, get them used to you being there all the time, to the point where they'll, like I said, the best you can hope for is indifference. Well, now they're indifferent. They'll go about their business and leave you in your camp, and they won't really mess with you or anything. And But if you're in the area enough and they're not alarmed by you, they won't really go to very much effort to try and cover their presence either, because they know that they're there. So they'll make noises loud enough for you to hear them. They'll, not cover their tracks quite so well, so you can find them. Because they're just like, man, what's this stupid human still doing here? He's been here for a month. Well, he hasn't got a gun or anything. He's not hunting anything. I don't know what he's doing here, but whatever, just ignore him.
Now let me ask you a question. When you were in that situation, how did you subsist when you're out there camping for so long? Did you fish and things like that, or did you just bring meals with you?
Yeah, I would just go to town every, a couple, 2-3 days, get some more food, bring it back out, throw it in the cooler. Didn't cook anywhere near where my tent was. I had actually a little fire pit I made about 200 yards away from there where I'd cook my food and eat it, and then I'd go back to the tent. So there was no smell of food or cooked food or table scraps or anything anywhere near my tent to attract them and or other large predators in the area.
Okay.
So one precaution, make sure you don't smell like yummy food or anything. That's always a bad idea.
So no rubbing peanut butter on and going for a jog.
Nope. And I got to say, while I was there, I was starting to have some issues with the really curious ones getting too close to where my camp was. I was actually in a tent that was inside of a thicket, and I had made like a little S-shaped tunnel going into it. And even if they were on all fours, they'd have trouble squeezing through it without making noise. And then I put up 2 little cheapy infrared sensors that had crossing beams, so if it managed to dodge one of them, the other one would hit them. And they'd go off and let me know they were in there. And after I set that up, they quit trying to get into the thicket and get right up to my tent, but they'd still walk around it all the time. And you could hear them at night and stuff sometimes going past or something like that. So that was a little bit unnerving, to say the least.
Wow. So let's get right into this then. When it comes to dark Bigfoot stories, what is some of the worst things you've heard?
Well, most of the worst Bigfoot stories you're never going to hear because the person died and there's no witness to report it because they're dead. This, I think, is the case with a lot of the Type 4 encounters that have gone the wrong way. that the reason that there's not more reports of this is because they're very efficient. They don't screw up very often. And if they're looking to grab you, yeah, well, you're not going to be making the report. If you got somebody else in your group that sees it, they might be making a report. The incident, the Mattawa River up in Canada comes to mind, where they had, and this is like back, I think close to a century ago, there was a family named Sears. Not sure if they're connected to that family or not, but could be.
Okay.
They wanted to go moose hunting. It was a father and a son, and they got up there, and they were encouraging the guide to take them to an area that people don't usually hunt in, so they could get a really big trophy moose. He said, well, I know this one area, but we can only hunt on this one side of the lake. Can't go to the other side of the lake. Well, why not? Well, there's something that lives over there. Don't go over to that side of the lake. So he gets them there. They got their own little separate canoes and stuff. And the son, he sets up, like on one side of the shore of the lake, and him and the father are set up a little bit further down the shoreline on the same side of the lake. And all of a sudden here he sees the kid get in the canoe and start paddling across the lake. And he's like, oh, my God, what are you doing? Stop it. He's yelling and everything. Kid's not paying attention to him. He jumps in his canoe, tells the father to stay put, goes after him, tries to, head the kid off before he gets to shore. Way before he got there, the kid had already made landfall on the opposite shore of the lake or the river, whatever it was there, and was going out into the woods looking for something, who knows what. But as he was getting closer to the shore, he starts hearing multiple gunshots. And the kid comes running out of the woods, terrified looking, with this huge Bigfoot-looking creature in hot pursuit right behind him. Well, at this point, the guide starts pouring shots into this thing, too, because he knows what's going on. And while he was watching and shooting at this thing, it caught up to the kid, grabbed him, ripped his head off, and with his head in one hand and his ankle dragging his body in the other hand, turned around and walked back off into the woods with him.
Oh.
Well, needless to say, the guide was more than a little bit freaked out about this and continued pouring lead into this thing as fast as he could, but it didn't seem to have much of any effect on it. Let out a roar, turned around, and walked off with the remains. The father was beside himself. He was trying to get across the lake in his canoe and go rescue the kid and everything, and the guide basically had to take his rifle away from him and say, no, you'll just get killed too. We're out of here. We need to go make a report and whatnot. And they came back. They made a report. The hunting guide, I guess, left the area, moved to somewhere else, and I'm not sure if he was ever even a hunting guide again. And the father, of course, had lost his son. And this could be a type 4 because it's in that sort of the right area for it. And the interesting thing that it was only on one side of this body of water. If you were on the other side of it, you're just fine. It seems to come up a lot in Canada, especially with these type 4 things. Maybe they don't swim. But, there's certain areas where even the rangers will tell you, you can, the river I referenced earlier is a drainage in between two big lakes, and you're totally allowed to canoe on it. But interestingly, during the 2 or 3 miles on that where you're connecting the two lakes, you're not allowed to pull off and land on either bank. Wow. You have to stay on the river.
Well, how do they explain that then? Because, of course.
Yeah, how do they explain that? I don't think they do explain that, but that's the rule. You're not supposed to get out of your canoe. You have to stay on the river when you're on this river.
Oh, jeez.
Which is much the same thing as Nahanni Valley, where they basically don't allow any open tourism or people wandering around. Generally, if you're going to go off the beaten path or something, you need to get special permission and file with forestry and whatnot so they know where to go, if they even allow it. And most of the people that go up there basically take canoe trips down the Nahanni River. And, the ones that have done so report that, interestingly, they have certain areas where they want you to camp if you're going to be, more than one day, which, of course, is pretty much a given in an area that big. You're going to have to camp overnight. And the areas they've got set aside tend to be places like a little sandbar with a giant cliff right behind it. So there's no way to get down to the river down that cliff. The only way you can get to that sandbar is to be on the river and pull up and camp there.
Oh, my God. That's crazy.
And nobody finds that suspicious either, apparently.
Well, and that's interesting because, of course, there is no official recognition of these things, but it seems that there is, if only in those kind of guidelines. That seems to indicate they're definitely concerned about something in other areas.
Well, yeah. I mean, as far as, let me back up a little bit. There's no official recognition of them here. There is in other countries. Russia recognized Bigfoot as an endangered species back in the 60s, and France and Germany have both recognized it as an endangered species too.
Yeah.
So there are countries that recognize Bigfoot actually exists and it's a real thing. We're just kind of the retards over here in the Western continent.
Well, that at least that doesn't speak for all of us, I think. And there's a bunch of us out here that know that there's definitely something more. And I just think of the strength and the ability of these things, and you think if they are mad, there's really nothing we can do to stop it, because in that story, that's two people pumping rounds into this thing, rounds that were meant to kill a moose.
Exactly. This is big game rifle. They weren't plinking away at it with a 22 long rifle or something. These are big bore guns. And this, according to the description, this sucker was like 9-10 feet tall. So he was a big boy.
Oh, man. That is all kinds of terrifying.
Yeah. And some people don't really recognize how much armor dense muscle provides. It reminds me of a story that I heard with these two bodybuilder brothers got into an argument. These guys were both just hulks,
Mm-hmm.
And the one of them was really pissed off at his brother, and he pulled out a .38 and shot him in the chest at virtually point-blank range. And the bullet did not penetrate further than his chest muscle. It just lodged in his chest muscle, and then he grabbed the gun out of his brother's hand, proceeded to whack the snot out of him, and took himself to the hospital. So my point here being that, even in best case scenarios where you got, a really powerful rifle or something, just how thick is their muscle and how dense is it in the area that you're shooting at? The bullet will go through it, maybe, but maybe it won't penetrate very much further.
Right.
And we don't know exactly where their internal organs are. I mean, we can assume that their layout is like a human, but that doesn't mean it's the case.
Right. Wow. That's true. You don't know where the critical shot is.
No, I mean, you can assume their heart is, slightly left of dead center in the body, but we don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
Who's got one on a slab that's autopsied it?
Good point. Yeah. How would you critically wound it? You don't know where critical is.
Yeah, I mean, unless you can get a, lucky shot and put one through their eye or something, and yeah, good luck. They're super fast, so probably not going to happen. But to get back to this whole thing about how Bigfoot is often portrayed as this, giant huggable Wookiee or something, it brings me back to a book that Kathy Muscovitz Strain put out, field archaeology on behalf of the federal government with all the native tribes and stuff. They find like new pictoglyphs or something. She'll go document them and make sure it's, the area is set aside for protection from the government, So she's had lots and lots and lots of interaction with most of the tribes on the continent. And I remember she was getting an interview somewhere on some show, and the guy who was doing the interview asked her, well, are there any reports of Bigfoot being dangerous? And she said, yes, there's reports of Bigfoot eating people. And then the next question was, well, how isolated are these reports? I mean, how many Indian tribes report this? And she paused for a second and said, pretty much all of them.
Jeez. Yeah. Wow.
So this whole notion that they're just, friendly forest buddies and everything is absolutely diametrically opposed to what the native tribes who've been here thousands of years have to say about them.
Yeah. Well, that's a real revelation to me. I didn't know that was such I had heard those legends here and there, but I didn't realize that it was such a widespread belief among the First Nations.
Yeah, it's actually, I back her up on that one, because all the different people from different native tribes I've talked to about that, they'll all say that. Even the ones that have the opinion that Bigfoot isn't like very dangerous, you leave him alone, he'll leave you alone, sort of thing, will still admit that yes, there's been people kidnapped, there's been people that possibly have been eaten. There's people that have disappeared, and we're pretty sure Bigfoot got them, and we never saw them again. So what happened to them?
Right. Yeah, and you got to wonder though, is that, of course, we talk about the types, is that a perhaps confusion with the type 4s are the ones that eat the people, but they just manage to be in all the primary First Nations areas?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, honestly. I mean,
Okay.
There's definitely the Janoskwa Wendigo type over there in the upper East Coast and up into Canada, Alaska, down through the mountain chains on the East Coast of the U.S. and stuff, but they're not ubiquitous. You don't hear reports of them from all over the continent. But you do hear reports from all over the continent and the native legends that pretty much every tribe have got the legend of somebody disappeared or somebody was, taken by a Bigfoot. And then you get to the, speaking of taken by Bigfoot, they like to kidnap women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're taking a child, it's probably munchies. But if they're taking a woman specifically, what are they up to? And I know that the Kiowa had a long, long history of this with having problem Bigfoot kidnapping their women from them. And at one point, they actually got a war party together. They figured out where this local clan of Bigfoot was camped at, and they surrounded the little plateau or rise or whatever, hill, whatever it was that they had their base on top of, and they just completely surrounded this hill and went up it. When they got to the top, they massacred every friggin' Bigfoot there.
Oh, wow.
And that was the end of them raiding their camp and taking their women. Apparently, it was that one troop, and once they got rid of them, problem solved. But this brings up an interesting story that I'd like to share with you guys, which is
from
the book.
We got like a minute and a half.
Okay, we'll save that till after the break. This is a story of Seraphine Long, and some of you that are big Bigfoot aficionados will already have heard this, but Seraphine Long was kidnapped by a Bigfoot, kept in custody for quite some time, and then subsequently released much later.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And the it's so bizarre to think that can still happen, but it allegedly does, right?
Yeah, and some of these, the reports that I picked out actually are fairly recent. They're within the last century or so. So this isn't like way back in mythological legendary history or something. This is, the story I'm going to read you, The Hairy Giants of British Columbia by J.W. Burns, published 1940.
Oh.
J.W. Burns got this report, and he's the guy that coined the name Sasquatch. Because he couldn't really figure out how to spell Sasquatch, apparently. So he sort of made an Englishized version of it, which was even harder to spell. Yeah. And, that's where the name Sasquatch came from. It's technically not really an Indian name. It's sort of a corruption of an Indian name for Bigfoot.
So it's Sasquatch is the correct one?
Sasquatch. Yeah, it's Sesquec.
Oh, okay, Sasquatch. Okay, that's good to know. I'd heard some reference to that long ago, but with my memory, I could never remember the real name. But I just knew that.
Oh yeah, my memory sucks too. If I didn't read these things a dozen times, I wouldn't remember them either.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our first break here, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes. So don't go away for more of the Dark Side of Bigfoot with Duke Sullivan here on the Paranormal Portal. We'll be right back.
And I'll be right back. Like sig time.
welcome back, everybody, to the second half hour of our show tonight. We are going into the journey of discussing the dark side of Bigfoot, and I'm joined tonight by a wonderful friend of the show and friend of mine, and an amazing contributor as well, and many-time guest, Mr. Duke Sullivan. Welcome, sir.
Hey, buddy. Good to be here.
Well, we got a question in chat, and it's from a listener in the YouTube. He said, by the name of Just a Guy, and he says, so do they live underground, another dimension, skinwalkers? What's going on?
That actual question will be partially at least answered by the story.
Okay.
Yes, it does seem that they like to live underground. I mean, they don't seem to need shelter in the same way that we need it. In other words, they're really impervious to wet and cold. But apparently, like sometimes they want to get out of it too, just like we do. And at that point, they'll have, like a jumble of boulders or a cave, or, they'll make themselves a little temporary hut, throw pine boughs on top of it. And then when they don't need it anymore, they just tear it apart and abandon it. And we found things like that before too, where it looks like they've set up a structure. Actually, you and Don found one of those.
Yes. Yeah.
And in most cases, when people find them, it's just a structure. There's no pine boughs or anything on it. Mm-hmm. So the one you guys found must have been very recently, if it wasn't even abandoned, very recently abandoned.
It was, and I attributed that myself to the idea that maybe they caught our scent on it and was like, well, we're not going back there.
Yeah, the humans have found our hiding spot. We'll go move somewhere else. And yeah, they definitely would do that. They don't want you. They're not going to go back to the same place where you already know that they're there, and apparently you figured it out.
Right.
And we get that sort of thing too, and we're up in areas repeatedly, and we're following their tree structures and stuff around, and you know that they're following you around. You can just tell. Everything's dead silent, and no birds are chirping or anything, and you occasionally get the whiff of the weird smell and stuff, and. When you find one of their structures and then you figure how to follow their trail markers to the next one, that gets their attention. They're definitely following you around and watching what you're up to at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So before break, we ended up having to cut you short just before that because you were about to get into a story. But by all means, sir, share that.
All right.
That'd be great.
Well, this is from the Chehalis tribe. Again, I referenced before the break that J.W. Burns, teacher for the Chehalis Reserve in Harrison Mills from 1925 to 1945, had coined the word Sasquatch. And as a matter of fact, in 1980, the Chehalis Band in British Columbia adopted a stylized Sasquatch image as their symbol. So, even more interesting. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the source for this is a book called The Hairy Giants of British Columbia by J.W. Burns. And this is the actual report he got from Seraphine Long, who was abducted by a Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. First person, quote, I was walking toward home one day many years ago carrying a big bundle of cedar roots and thinking of the young brave thunderbolt that I was soon to marry. Suddenly, at a place where the bush grew close and thick beside the trail, a long arm shot out and a big hairy hand was pressed over my mouth. Then I was suddenly lifted up into the arms of a young Sasquatch. I was terrified, fought, and struggled with all my might. In those days, I was strong, but it was no good. The wild man was as powerful as a young bear, holding me easily under one arm, and with the other hand, he smeared tree gum over my eyes, sticking them shut so I could not see where he was taking me.
Ooh.
He then threw me over his shoulder and started to run. He ran on and on for a long, long time, up and down hills, through thick brush, across many streams, never stopping to rest. Once he had to swim a river, and then perhaps I could have gotten away, but I was so afraid of being drowned that I held on tightly with my arms around his neck. Although I was frightened, I could not but admire his easy breathing, his great strength and speed of foot. After reaching the other side of the river, he began to climb and climb. Presently, the air became very cold. I could not see, but I guessed that we were close to the top of a mountain. At last, the Sasquatch stopped hurrying. Then he stooped over and moved slowly, as if feeling his way along a tunnel. Presently, he laid me down very gently, and I heard people talking in a strange tongue I could not understand. The young giant next wiped the sticky tree gum from my eyelids, and I was able to look around me. I sat up and saw that I was in a great big cave. The floor was covered with animal skins, soft to touch and better preserved than we preserved them.
Mm.
A small fire in the middle of the floor gave all the light there was. As my eyes became accustomed to the gloom, I saw that besides the young giant who had brought me to the cave, there were two other wild people, a man and a woman. To me, a young girl, they seemed very, very old, but they were active and friendly, and later I learned that they were the parents of the young Sasquatch who had stolen me. When they all came over to look at me and I cried and asked them to let me go, they just smiled and shook their heads. From then on, I was kept a close prisoner. Not once would they let me go out of the cave. Always one of them stayed with me when the other two were away. They fed me well on roots, fish, and meat. After I learned a few words in their tongue, which is not unlike the Douglas dialect, I asked the young giant how he caught and killed the deer, mountain goats, and sheep that he often brought into the cave. He smiled, opening and closing his big, hairy hands. I guessed that he had just laid in wait, and when an animal got close enough, he leaped, caught it, and choked it to death. Well, actually, they snapped their necks, but she was pretty close.
Yeah.
He was certainly big enough, quick enough, and strong enough to do this. When I had been in the cave for about a year, I began to feel very sick and weak and could not eat much. I told this to the young Sasquatch, and I pleaded with him to take me back to my own people. At first, he got very angry, as did his father and mother, but I kept on pleading with them, telling them I wished to see my own people again before I died. I really was ill, and I suppose they could see that for themselves, because one day after I cried for a long time, the young Sasquatch went outside and returned with a leaf full of tree gum. With this, he stuck down my eyelids as he had done before. Then he again lifted me onto his big shoulder. The return journey was very like a bad dream, for I was lightheaded and in much pain. When we recrossed the whole river, I was almost swept away. I was too weak to cling to the young Sasquatch, but he held me with one big hand and swam with the other. Close to my home, he put me down and gently removed the tree gum from my eyelids. When he saw that I could see again, he shook his head sadly, pointing to my house, and then turned back into the forest. My people were all wildly excited when I stumbled back into the house where they had long ago given up me as dead. But I was too sick and weak to talk. I just managed to crawl into bed, and that night I gave birth to a child. The little one lived only a few hours, for which I've always been thankful. I hope that I never see a Sasquatch again.
Wow. So, I mean, even the idea that it was premeditated enough to know that it didn't want that person to see, so it used the tree gum, which I assume would be like pine sap. I'm just assuming.
Yeah, and that's not the only case of that, which is even more interesting, because you've got, if you go up into the Arctic, they've got a legend of something they call the Amatolik, which is a cannibal ogress that prowls the tundra and eats children. The cannibal ogress has a backpack that she made out of like woven together sticks. And when she catches one of the kids, she throws it in this backpack, which is like slippery or whatever on the inside, and gets jostled around a lot, so the kid doesn't get the opportunity to crawl back out again. And then when it gets back to its lair, it takes the kid out and eats him, essentially it. Now, this is interesting because it's sort of part of that same legend says that they will do that they'll smear the kid's eyes with gum and stick them shut, so that if the kid does manage to get out of the backpack, he can't see and get away anyway. Wow. Which also goes back to down the Pacific coast, where you've got the Zunaqua, the basket woman, which has a startlingly similar description. A female Bigfoot that has a basket on her back, gathers up children that stray too far from the camp, throws them in the backpack, takes them off in the woods, and eats them.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just like in one place. This is, you got mid-Pacific coast, and then up on the tundra, they're talking about essentially the same critter, same behavior. It's pretty creepy when you think about it.
It is, and the fact that the narrative remains the same over such a wide geographic region would suggest that, it's probably not the same story. It's several versions of encounters, at least to some extent.
Yeah, that's what I would gather from it too. I mean, there was definitely trade and interaction between the tribes and stuff, but when you're talking about tribes that are a couple thousand miles apart, probably not much trade and interaction going on there. And I mean, it's the same thing with legends about other things too. Eskimos have they have a word for dragon. They know what a dragon is.
Oh, really?
How do they know what a dragon is? They live in the Arctic. There aren't even lizards up there.
Right. Wow. Maybe these lands, there were be dragons.
Yeah, or, they came from someplace that was a lot less Arctic at one point, and it's still maintained in their culture about these critters that, at one point they either had legends about or actually saw, one or the other.
Well, that's interesting because, of course, a lot of the academics would say that the Inuit and other native peoples were probably Asiatic and made their way across the Bering Bridge and land bridge and made their way into this continent. So, and of course, dragons are huge in Chinese, Korean cultures. So,
Well, pretty much anywhere. It's hard to go anywhere on Earth and find a culture that doesn't have some kind of a weird concept of a dragon.
very true.
And that's one of those things. It's like, wait, how come like every place on Earth the natives have legends about three things: little people, giants, and dragons?
Yeah.
Why?
And Sasquatch.
Yeah, well, Sasquatch usually falls into the category of giants. Some of them aren't too particular about what. There's more than one kind of giant. Wait, what are you talking about? They don't know that. So, all they know is what's in their local area. And you get,
Right.
if you saw the new show, I've referenced that way over in the Solomon Islands. There's all kinds of legends about giants eating people. There's even reports of these things attacking Japanese and American troops during World War II when they were over there in the area fighting.
That's
and,
right.
And having troops taken and killed.
Yes, that's right. I remember hearing of legendary stories, of course, but at least unverified. But they all are really.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, the military is not too keen on releasing stories about giants eating troops, as you might imagine.
yeah, it probably would hurt the recruitment.
Yeah. Join our group and go to distant exotic lands, meet exciting, unusual people, and be eaten by a giant. Nah, that probably wouldn't go over very well.
Oh my God! Be roasted on a spit.
Yeah, if you're so lucky, they might just eat you raw. Who knows?
I don't know which is luckier, but yeah, that's really disturbing.
Well, I would hope if you're on a spit that might imply that you are maybe dead already.
That's true. That's hard to know, but yeah, that is so twisted. And it's again, it's the whole idea of these beings taking women to try to mate. That to me is really peculiar. Now, we've often theorized on the show here that perhaps things like the smallpox epidemic and could have spread into the Bigfoot Sasquatch communities and decimated the populations, of which maybe they're recovering now, and that's why there's more accounts and encounters with them than ever before. Is that maybe there's just more of them again because maybe they were almost wiped out. But you have to wonder if in that chain of events, if they just didn't have a breeding stock anymore, and so their idea was to try humans.
Yeah. Well, and apparently it works because although they seem to not be human, they're apparently close enough DNA-wise that they can produce hybrids. And for evidence of that, all I have to do is steer you toward the Ketchum DNA study,
Right.
which found that, there was human DNA and there was also something else DNA in all these samples that they got. And yeah, she was trying to get, from what I understand, she was trying to get a cross-section of samples of basically type 1s. So these are the ones that are always attributed to, they don't just eat people, they haul them off and, mate with the women, keep them for slaves, whatever the heck they end up doing with them.
Right.
And, it's so common in native culture for, these things will take women and run off with them sort of thing. You hear that over and over and over from a lot of different tribes. That's just as common, if not more so, than, they're stealing kids to eat them or they killed some guy and they ate him or something like that.
Yeah, that is weird. Have you seen that footage out of China where the woman claims she was abducted by a Yeren and eventually impregnated, and she escaped and got back to the village and had the boy, and there's a footage of this alleged child, and he does really have a lot of mongoloid features, and his arms seem way too long, and he's got the whole sloping brow and near conical head. And apparently he never learned language, like he never learned to speak, but he hated wearing clothes and always preferred it cooler and didn't like the heat a whole lot. But it would seem to suggest that you're right, that there is a genetic familiarity there.
Yeah, and I have seen that, and I saw the picture of the kid and everything. And one thing I'd like to point out that you brought up is that human beings all have very similar proportion in their bodies, unless you're, genetically abnormal. If you've got some defect or something, like you're a midget or something, like those poor people are just, they're born teeny.
Sure.
It's not normal. But amongst all the normal humans, the proportion of limbs and torso and whatnot is very, very, very similar. whether they're 7 feet tall or 5 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was not human proportion,
Yeah.
which is one of the things that was really weird about him. Because, yeah, like you were saying, proportions just wrong. Arms too long, head looked wrong, the whole sort of thing. And this isn't the only case of that. If you go back further, you had Zana over there in Russia that one of the guys from their official Bigfoot research over in Russia, it's actually government, head of the Department of Hominology in Moscow, Russia, Igor Burtsev and his compatriots have been all over this one for a long time now, and trying to figure out exactly where they buried her so they could get her skull and everything and do DNA testing on it. And they've had to settle on descendants that they've done DNA testing on. But again, the same thing about Zana, that she had just been captured and that, she was a wild woman. She didn't like wearing clothes. She didn't get cold. She could outrun a horse. Humans can't outrun horses. Okay, there's a big clue right there. Super strong, didn't like dogs. She'd like dig a hole in the ground and sleep there rather than being in a house or something like that. And just everything about it is just off and wrong. It's, it just doesn't sound like a human at all, even though it was more or less passed off as one. And I guess she had the same problem that like couldn't learn the language or could only learn a few words or something like that. So very, very strange. And there's another even lesser known report from over in Russia in the 1950s that a woman had been abducted by, what do they call them, a mink. That's their local word for Bigfoot. And the mink had taken her away and sort of made her his cave wife or something. And he was keeping her prisoner in this little cave and stuff. And then eventually he was gone for a while, and she managed to get enough space between the boulder that was covering the entrance to the cave or whatever and get out of it. Made her way back to civilization, told people what happened. And they immediately assumed she was crazy and threw her in an insane asylum.
Oh, yeah.
So she didn't do very well there. In fact, she was getting sicker and weaker for quite a while, and all the doctors were really worried about her. And then all of a sudden one day she started feeling better and she started eating and her whole mood had improved and everything. And one of the doctors said, hey, if you keep improving like this, we might be able to release you. And she was just like, oh, I don't care. I'm going to be out of here soon anyway. And he said, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, my friend from the forest came and found me. He was looking in the window a couple nights ago. He's going to come back and get me. And of course they're all like, yeah, okay, right. Woo, 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 woo. She's just even more deluded than before. Yeah, well, the next day she wasn't there, and the bars in the window were ripped out of the wall, and they never saw her again.
Wow. That is so intense.
So, yeah, something showed up that could literally rip the bars off this high security, window and take the window out and walk off with her. So, probably not a human.
Yeah. Now, what date was this? What time range?
This is the 1950s.
1950s, yeah. So, I mean, they would have had more modern ways of building secure buildings, so it wouldn't just be...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially for places, like prisons or insane asylums or something. Those are high security. You don't want dangerous, crazy people getting out and going and attacking the local public, so they make sure you're going to stay in there. And this is Russia we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, that's true, too. Yeah. Oh, man. It is disturbing, but it's also, pretty fascinating. Of course, this kind of a topic it's difficult for me because, you think about people being stolen and subjected to, God knows what. And against this kind of adversary, we would just be helpless. And if it wasn't for our technology and firearms and stuff, we wouldn't, have any sort of recourse. But, in going through the stories so far tonight, and even today, we hear these legends of kill teams that are apparently and allegedly dispatched to deal with real problem Sasquatch. And you had mentioned, was it the Paiutes or whoever had surrounded that area where their women were missing? They found out where they lived and they wiped them out. And that still happens today. And yet, it's a
well, that was the Kiowa. Another good example of that is the Paiute tribe that Princess Winnemucca brought up the story about how all these giants, and these weren't Bigfoot, they were giants, red-haired giants that kept capturing their people and eating them. And they tried to make a deal with them, like, hey, leave us alone. We'll help feed you. We'll bring extra buffalo and stuff. Like, man, they weren't interested. So they managed to get them all caught in their cave, Love Lock Cave, piled up wood the entrance, set it on fire, killed all of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's
couldn't make a deal with them, so they had to get rid of them.
And that's another one of the situations where the Smithsonian was dispatched and the bones turned up missing. Was that one of those two?
Yeah, well, this is before they even knew anything about the story. There were some guys that were there. They were mining guano, for fertilizer because this cave had been there for so long. There was like 7 or 10 feet of it on the floor of the cave, so they mined it all out. In the process of taking all of it out, they started finding bones and giant shoes and duck decoys and all kinds of weird stuff. That a lot of it being the wrong scale, and apparently several giant skeletons, and then. Of course, the friendly guys from the Smithsonian Museum showed up and took it away for further study, and whoops, lost it somewhere.
They must have a hell of
which
a
happens
basement.
over.
Yeah, it does. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
Dewhurst has an excellent book out on that for anybody that's interested in the cover-up thing. It's called The Ancient Giants Who Ruled North America and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. And the first 150 pages of this book is all reprints of newspaper articles that all end with, and then the guys from the Smithsonian took the evidence away for further research.
Right, and that's so disturbing to me because, and it's something I've mentioned on the show before. But I mean, we have precedents in so many different religions and legends throughout the entire world for the idea that these things were there. So, what would the end game be for wanting to destroy that or whether or not they're destroyed? Of course, we don't know. They could just be continuing to hide them. But why the cover up? What is that? What does that gain them, or what does it accomplish?
Powell Doctrine. Go back to when Abe Lincoln was around. He made a speech at Niagara Falls where he was talking about we're seeing the same sight right now that the eyes of the giants that used to rule North America used to gaze on. Now, that's an actual part of the speech. What was he referencing? Well, at that point, people knew there was giants in North America. They were finding their bones all the time. It was just an accepted thing. Then manifest destiny. And if you want to go and take everything away from all the local tribes and feel justified in your own mind that it's okay to do it, the first thing you have to do to justify it is to make yourself, completely convinced that they're always savages. They never had any kind of civilization, and we should take all this land away from them and help civilize them so they actually have a real civilization. The poor savages, this is their kind of BS thinking. And it justified the Western expansionism and the manifest destiny doctrine that we are actually obliged to go and invade the West and take over all these tribes and force them onto reservations, make them learn our language and religion and blah, 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 blah. Well, the whole problem with this is we were already finding all of these, giant earthworks and stuff over that on the East Coast, all the big serpent mounds and all that kind of stuff. Plenty of evidence there was a higher culture here that had, some even good-sized cities and stuff, not tribal villages. And, you've got to cover all that up in order to have the manifest destiny to say that they're just savages and we should go take everything over. Now, the interesting part to me is it should have been fairly obvious to them that we're talking about two different things. The normal human North American natives probably didn't have that sort of a really high level of culture, but the people that did were the giants.
Oh, sure.
And that's why the guys that have done really a lot of research on this will tell you the mound builder culture weren't humans; those were giants, and some of them had humans for slaves they were using to do all their dirty work for them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it stands to reason as large as they were. And again, this is the 15, 20-foot range for giants, or have you heard?
Well, no, this would be more like the between 7 and 10 foot range generally. That's another thing that comes up, that there was more than one kind of giants on the continents. The bigger, taller ones were just incredibly nasty and couldn't be dealt with whatsoever. And some of the smaller ones were actually a lot more like humans. And in fact, some of them didn't like the other giants and would leave their civilization and just go live with the Indians and become part of their tribes, which is again sort of interesting because the tribes that have these legends are some of the tribes that when they were first met by the colonists were going like, hey, some of these guys are like 7 feet tall. What the hell's going on here? These guys are really big. Well, yeah, because the giants have been inbreeding with the tribe for a while. So they were smaller than the original giants that had inbred with them, but they're quite a bit bigger than normal humans were.
Well, that's interesting because a friend of ours, Nase, who's in Anishinaabe, he tells us of the history of his people, and they were there was a time when they were at 7 feet plus average.
Yeah. Yeah, the Misabi, that's from up there in northern Minnesota. That's the giant there. Misabi is Bigfoot, Misabi is giant.
Very, very cool. But we, ladies and gentlemen, are going to go to our hour break now. The night is flying by, but the information is, as always, impeccable and amazing. So I hope you guys will stick around for hour number 2, where it's just going to keep getting better and better. So use the loo, get a drink, sit back and relax, and we'll meet you back here in just a couple minutes.
All right, sig time.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, dripping scars across my heart. Raging anger pours inside me as their lies keep falling apart. Just make sure that you're well fed. I'm not talking yet. I'm not talking yet.
Caroline is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 is now underway on the Paranormal Portal. I hope you're enjoying our journey tonight. Please keep your hands and legs and other extremities inside the car at all times, as extended limbs may be converted to stumps. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you guys had a good break, and thanks for sticking around. If you're new to the show, on Fridays and Saturdays, the Paranormal Portal is also being broadcast on TFR Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, and there are break schedules that we have to sync the YouTube broadcast up with. And so that's why I make these breaks on the YouTube if you're joining us on the YouTube, and but those on the other branches don't notice that. But those of you on YouTube may be like, why are we sitting here watching a video? Let's get back to the discussion. Well, I have to keep it synced up in order for that to make sense. So I put together the videos to make it at least hopefully a more enjoyable experience while we go through the station breaks as they occur. So just to explain that, because it does come up from time to time with people that are checking out the show, like, what's with the breaks? Well, that's what's with them. So anyway, I'm joined tonight by our wonderful friend and Bigfoot researcher and pilot of World Bigfoot Radio. Mr. Duke Sullivan is joining us here tonight, and we are talking about the dark side of Bigfoot. And it's, of all the things to have a dark side, this has got to be like your worst nightmare kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, getting picked up by a Bigfoot and run off with one definitely would not be fun. I don't want that happening.
The thing is that, as far as our ability, in terms of natural comparisons, we're just this side of a snail. I mean, really, we are slow, we are clumsy, we are not strong, we're not agile, we're not nimble. We really, if we didn't have technology, we would have never crawled out of the, we would have never progressed into anything near what we are now.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we're totally dependent on our technology. And that's one of the things I think that kind of throws people about the whole Bigfoot thing when they get interested in it and they start doing research on them and stuff. It's like, well, how do these things make a living? They look kind of like, yeah, but they're not us. They're bipedal, but they ain't us.
Right. They
don't have any problems with this stuff. To give you a personal example, I was down on the Blackfoot River, and this was December. Oh, God. I want to say it was like 16th. I'm not sure exactly. It was later in December. And, of course, this is kind of like most people aren't camping out in December. So we're sort of in an area where, Bigfoot wasn't expecting people would be camping out in December. Well, it's about 10 o'clock at night. And I had actually been hearing noise down in the river, unusual noise. The river's pretty loud. It's fast flowing. It makes a lot of noise all the time. But the unusual noise of like rocks being turned over, clacking together. And I had gone down and looked earlier and hadn't seen anything. And I came back up to camp. And apparently the other guy that was camped there with me heard the same thing later on that night around 10 o'clock and also got the idea. He wanted to go see what it was. Well, we knew that there was a beaver downriver from us, and there were actually otters that were upriver from us, so he figured it was an otter.
Okay.
So he got his flashlight, and he went and crept down the embankment quietly in the dark, and he was going to sneak up right to the shore and get the flashlight on him and see the otters playing in the river. And when he got down there, he could see like some sort of a mass out in the middle of the river, but it was dark. He couldn't tell what it was exactly, so he hit it with a flashlight. And then all of a sudden, the mass stood up. It was a Bigfoot's back that was just above the water, and it twisted at the waist and gave him a glare.
Oh.
And at that point, he went, I am in the wrong bleeping place, and turned his flashlight off and just kind of stood there stunned for a second. And apparently it looked at him for like 2 or 3 more seconds and then just went back into the river, face back down into the river, digging around, turning rocks over. Because, we had been there long enough that apparently it realized that, hey, there's these idiots that are camped here for some reason. And they don't have guns. I'm not worried. And just went back to doing whatever he was doing. And about... he said like less than 3 or 4 minutes later, he heard what sounded like a mountain lion scream, clearly wasn't, coming from the top of the bluff. And this thing got up out of the river, clambered up the embankment, went up the cliff. And he came back up into camp looking extremely freaked out and said, hey, I just saw one in the river. And, of course, I was down there in like a second with a camera and the flashlight. And, of course, by that, there was nothing there. We did actually get a video of the track line on the opposite shore on the embankment there where he came down and got into the river and went back up again. But that was all, that was the only physical or, digital picture image or any kind of evidence that we got out of that one. Mm-hmm. But at that point, he decided that he didn't really want to do field research anymore.
Changed his mind.
So my point here is that it was about 27 degrees, and he was standing in a river at least 45 minutes, judging by the noise going on. Could have been a lot longer than that. Mm-hmm. Basically submerged in this river. It's 27 degrees. There's snow and ice on both banks. The river itself is so cold, if you jump in August, you want to get out immediately. It makes you hurt. Right. It's so cold. This is all, runoff from glaciers and stuff.
Oh, geez.
And this thing is in there for better part of an hour at least. A human would have had hypothermia and been washed down the river within 5 minutes.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's just how hardy and durable these things are. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and that's why I say you just, even though they're bipedal and they look something like us, you can't compare them to us because their physical capabilities just make us look like total wimps. Right,
yeah. We have, of course, benchmarks for physical prowess, and, when you consider things like Navy SEALs and stuff like that, and I'm not taking anything away from those accomplishments. Those guys are physically amazing. And it does demonstrate that people are still capable of some pretty great things, but by comparison, we're still, turtles.
Yeah, we're slow and dumb and have no senses and can't move very fast and don't notice them standing behind a tree peeking at us and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, they can pretty much rely on us being oblivious, and it's just getting worse because we're more and more civilized, more and more people living in the city. Less and less out in the woods all the time, interacting with nature and knowing how to get around out there. Mm-hmm. So we're not getting better at finding them. We're getting worse at it because we're more reliant on technology and less reliant on actual woodcraft and stealth.
Now, last night when we were talking after the bedtime story show, you talked to me about a guy that was literally beat to hell and still made his way into town. Would you mind repeating that?
Oh, sure. This is a story that doesn't come up very often. It's just not mentioned by most Bigfoot researchers. Maybe they didn't do enough research or something, or maybe you need to be local to know about it. What we were referencing was the Wilderness Hunter story that Teddy Roosevelt put out in his book, The Wilderness Hunter, where he was talking about Bauman, the fur trapper, mm-hmm. and how Bauman told him the story about how him and his partner had been attacked by a wild man, and apparently his partner Jessup had been killed by it. Two interesting things here. First of all, the story starts out with that there had been a warning from the locals there that somebody had gotten killed in that area not too far before that, mysterious circumstances, some kind of animal killed them. The natives never go in that area, never have, and we don't even like to go up there anymore. Maybe don't want to go there. So these guys went up there anyway, and lots of beaver around there. Now, interestingly, Kelly Shaw's been up there trying to find that exact spot several times. And he'll tell you to this day that the area is overflowing with beaver. They never got trapped out for some weird reason. So you've got not only Jessup getting killed, but apparently shortly before that, somebody else got killed. It's never named. And a few years before that, there was another person that got killed. And this guy's name was Dick, and he was a prospector. And he had apparently been out solo prospecting in the area and been attacked by wild men. By the time he made his way back to town, he was a bloody mess. He was physically beaten to a pulp, barely made it back. He told them a short version that, he had been attacked by wild men and please help me and all that. And they tried to do the best they could to patch the guy up, but, frontier town, middle of nowhere.
Right.
Probably not even a local doctor. He didn't survive. But they felt really bad for him, so they named the area Bloody Dick. And apparently the area was still named that up until very recently. I had a local tell me that they finally changed the name back in the 1980s because people kept stealing the road sign for some reason. You can imagine what the reason was. Beavis and Butthead must live over here or something. But anyway, that was so there wasn't just Jessup killed in that area. Within like 5 or 6 years, there was 3 people that got killed in that area.
Wow, that is amazing. And so that's just one of those places that everybody knows not to go. Anybody familiar with the area?
Yeah, and even people that are, know Bigfoot exists and whatnot, because this is right over it's in Idaho. It's on the Montana border, basically, in the Bitterroots. And they'll tell you, if you're out in the more central mountain ranges and stuff, it's, business as usual. The Bigfoot will try and avoid you. They're kind of neutral. They'll leave you alone. If you go over into the Bitterroot Mountains, they'll attack you. They'll throw rocks at you. They'll throw logs at you. They don't want you there. They're very aggressive for some weird reason. And it's just, that's the way they've been for apparently at least 150 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Now, we did allegedly have a caller, but I was notified of it, but I looked and there is no call on the board. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to call in and be a part of the discussion, please do. The phone number is 720-923-0500. Again, 720-923-0500. Okay. All right. I see that. I've been notified that there is somebody on hold, and I see that somebody now, and this is somebody we both know and love. So let's welcome her onto the show. Hello, Miss Cindy. Welcome to the show.
Seriously.
Hi, Cindy.
Hey, just a minute. Okay. Are you all there?
Yep. We're here.
No, I left.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So what's going on tonight?
I'm fine.
Good.
Well, I was going to listen to the whole show while I was on hold.
Were you already on hold? Did you already call in once?
Oh, I've been listening to the whole show on the phone.
Oh, dude, I've been checking every once in a while. I must have really not checked a lot longer than I thought. Sorry about that.
See, that's the story of my life. Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Well, welcome to the show.
I'm listening, so it's all good.
Okay. Well,
nothing. Y'all said call in, so I'm calling in.
All
What do you
right.
want to talk about?
Well, we're talking about the bad side of Bigfoot, the dark side of Bigfoot tonight, and we're talking about aggressive encounters and stuff. So, pretty creepy stuff. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. What is that place called? Augusta, Montana. That is what I was going to talk to you on the phone about, Duke. I had been there a couple of times, took my horses, and I went riding with my husband went riding with some of the wranglers, and I went on one of their rides, but I had my own horse. So, is there anything outside of Augusta, Montana, in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area? Do you know anything about that area?
I haven't heard any specific reports that I can recall right off the top of my head coming out of Augusta, although it's certainly possible there have been some. As far as the Bob Marshall Wilderness goes, stay out of it.
Mm.
What? That's
very
my favorite
good
place to go.
Yeah, it's not a good place to go.
Sun
I've had
Canyon Lodge.
three very experienced woodsmen tell me that they had done extensive trips through the Bob, and none of them will go up there again. 2 of them wouldn't explain why. The third one told me he found a track line that he followed for about a quarter mile of 17-inch Bigfoot tracks, and that convinced him that he didn't want to be there anymore. So I don't know about the other 2 guys. But the area is incredibly rugged. It's really difficult to get around. There's, it's not accessible. And there's a lot of mountain lions, and there's a lot of grizzly bears, and problem grizzly bears that are nearby get relocated there.
Oh, okay.
So the area is full of problem grizzly bears to start with, and probably crawling with Bigfoot too.
Well, before I moved up north, when I was still east in Texas, we went up there to a place called Sun Canyon Lodge, and we drove up there. We didn't take our horses. We just drove up there. My husband is a experienced, wrangler or whatever, and we just rode up there. We didn't take our horses or nothing. That was like 2002. And then when we came back, I said, I want to move to Montana. And he said, okay, I'll put in the paperwork. So we didn't get to Montana because the Iraqi war started. He was active military, and I got to North Idaho, so that's fine. Because heck, I mean,
Well, that's
God,
close enough.
look
It's
what's
not as
happening to me.
dangerous as Montana, so you're better off over there. It's
No,
not as dangerous as
but right, but I did take my horses 2 times. It's like a 4.5-hour trip from my house to Sun Canyon Lodge outside of Augusta, Montana. And I have ridden a little bit in the mountains there. I won't go by myself, but I did go with some of the routes with some of the wranglers riding there. And I was just wondering, like what the area was about. And then I did go to Shoto, Montana, but I kind of just went looking around. But man, that area is that's like my favorite place of all time.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous, and apparently it's very, very rugged too, because even the very experienced woodsmen sort of think twice about going very far into the area, especially by.
Wow.
Yeah, they had the Sun Canyon Lodge is basically like a huge, when you walk in through the front door, it's like going back in time, and it's like this restaurant, and it's crazy. And then there's a bunch of cabins on the property, and there's a main house, but and then there's like that black wall of the Rocky Mountain front. It's just, I don't know. I loved it. I felt like, and I want to go back there. That's one place I've never, quote, researched, but I would love to go back. I've always felt, I don't know, at home there. But I do remember these people were camping, and they came to the lodge, and there was a grizzly down the road that they had to relocate. So, yeah, you're right about that.
Yep, yeah, it's one of their favorite spots to drop off problem grizzlies. Part of the reason for that is the Great Wall, a natural formation that's along part of the border of it. You guys can find Google images of this to take a look at. And it kind of reminds you of the wall on Kong Island, except it's not human constructed. It's a cliff 1,000 feet high and 22 miles long, which sort of stops the bears from wandering back out again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the only area that I've, been to and I didn't know too much about, and I just, I don't know, I told my husband I would like to go back because he helped when he goes. Well, back then, I don't know if they have the same owners yet. Still, he would help take some of the whatever, the mules or whatever the supplies to the backcountry for the city slippers, I guess. Not me. There's no way, because it's way too dangerous. A lot of shale and stuff like that. And he had taken his horse, and then my horse just followed. I didn't go because I'm not. There's no way I'm going to ride into that. And his horse just stopped, and he got off his horse, and the other wranglers said that some of their mules have fallen over the cliff into the area there. I'm trying to think what it's called. Some reservoir that's outside of Sun Canyon Lodge there. I can't think of the name, but so I would like to go back there and research. But anyway.
Bring your loud rocket.
So I'm probably hogging the phone. I should probably hang up.
No. You're fine. You're fine. You're part of the family too. You can certainly share. But I if it's that bad, Well, it may go either way. What's your thoughts on that, Duke?
I wouldn't research there.
You wouldn't?
Nope.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, guys. Well,
yeah, this is
I'm
coming
gonna
from the guy
go.
that camps in ghost towns that are infested with Bigfoot.
Well.
Yes. Speaking of, we still need to get to whatever that place is that you were talking about.
Oh yeah, I'll be up there again this summer. All you got to do is show up for a trip, and we can go up there. It's only 30 miles from here.
Sweet. I'm coming.
Okay. Well, whatever. We'll plan it. Maybe Brent's coming with me. I'll pick you up.
That's right. I'll be out there with my thumb out going, like, 2 Dukes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just hold
Okay,
up
well
the,
then,
hold up the
let us
hitchhike
know,
sign and say
Duke.
Bigfoot.
Okay, well then, y'all plan it and whatever. I'll just show up, okay?
All right. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
I do several open invitation let's go squatching outings every summer. So if you want to make it to one, just all you got to do is show up. Unlike some researchers, I don't charge you anything to be there. Bring your own stuff. It's free.
Awesome. Very cool.
Okay.
All right, Cindy. Thanks so
Okay,
much
well,
for
I
calling.
will talk to y'all later, okay?
All right, my dear. Take care, and thanks for calling.
Have a good night, Cindy.
Okay, bye.
That's cool. I'm glad she called in. She's been on the show several times as well, and we've had some great discussions. She's, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with Cindy, she's also one of the researchers who has been on the show and has some great information and great experiences. And she's currently been working on doing some research around her own property, which has had some really hellacious, I don't know, it sounds like Dogman kind of stuff. It's just bizarre noises.
Yeah, it does. And if any of you folks are more interested, you can go check out just the very last episode that I turned out, not the new one. Was the second time Cindy's been on the show, and we've got the audio recording of what potentially is a dogman off in the woods making a huge racket. And she also has an interesting sound capture of Bigfoot making noise too. So those are both really cool to look at. But yeah, I'm a little bit concerned because it really does seem like there's one of them around the area. And as much as I don't really trust Bigfoot all that far, I wouldn't trust Dogman half as far as I could throw him.
Right. Now, I guess we only got a couple minutes before the break, but I see, and I'm seeing around town here in Sandpoint where I live, there's been it seems like a lot of people are posting missing dogs pictures, and it's really got me curious what the hell's going on. Now I realize it could be just a mountain lion or something like that. We get a little wildlife around here for sure, but I also know the idea that in a lot of cases they can be quick meals for wayward cryptids too. Yeah,
and there's a not altogether tiny list of cryptids potentially that would eat dogs, and none of them are ones you want around your area.
Right.
The most benign would be just like a regular Bigfoot. That apparently will do something like that occasionally, but it's not common. Usually they don't like problem dogs that are making noise, you're giving away their presence, chase them, bark at them, stuff like that. They'll kill dogs like that. And conversely, there's other dogs that are not afraid of them, that are quiet and well-mannered. It seems like they'll actually make friends with some of them. Caveman's mentioned multiple times how he'll come out in the morning and his dogs will both be off their chains, and these are like the kind of, it's got the little snap on the chain. Unless you've got a thumb, you can't take them off the chain.
Right.
And he'll come out, they'll both be off their chains, and the chains will be like wound together.
Oh no. Yeah.
And the dogs will be wandering around, and he'd be like, "Oh, your pals came and let you go, huh? You're supposed to be warning me they're around here, not working with me, you traitors."
Yeah, exactly. They're changing sides, I guess. But
yeah, exactly. Oh, Bigfoot bribed us, and he let us off the chains again. He's a good guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's one way to the dog's heart, is to let him off the chain.
Yeah, give them a rabbit and let them off the chain. They're happy campers. Oh, we won't bark at you anymore. You're a good guy.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yeah, go eat all the horses' grain and steal water out of the trough and stuff. We don't mind.
Yeah, exactly. And then that brings up an important point too. That we were talking about habituating earlier, and I've heard through the years so many stories of people that were inadvertently habituating with food because of things just like that. The horse grain. and pet food that's left out in a big container outside. If there's been several stories of people moving that, and all of a sudden fences are broken and all hell's breaking loose, and it's because the Bigfoot can't find the food anymore.
Yeah. I had a guest on my show, Researcher X, that's actually been up to Coloma with me here. She's down in Florida. Mm-hmm. She's got 2 horse ranches, and the one down in Florida was having a problem with that, where they had just all the grain in a big bin. It was inside the barn, wasn't locked or anything. Mm-hmm. And at some point, they started noticing that they were missing too much grain. And when you got like dozens of horses, you imagine how much grain you'd have to be like missing for it to become obvious that you're missing grain.
Hold that thought, brother, because we're going to go to our last break, but I definitely want to hear the end of this. So, ladies and gentlemen, one more break to go, and the lines are open. So if you want to call in and be a part of it, just call away. So we'll be right back.
Sick time.
gentlemen, welcome back to the last half hour of our journey tonight. I hope you guys are enjoying the ride. I'm having a great time myself, and of course, it helps when you have a great guest, and we definitely got that tonight. But before I get back into this, I just want to say a special thank you to Mr. Wes Germer. I caught your comment in the chat as I was reviewing it today from last night's show. I really appreciate your accolades and your kind praise. It was a real honor to be on the show, and I'm sorry I didn't see it last night when it happened, but I just really appreciate it. So thank you so much. But I am joined tonight by my good friend and co-conspirator in the portal tonight, Mr. Duke Sullivan from World Bigfoot Radio. We're back.
All right.
We are back. So you had just gotten into the story about someone who was inadvertently habituating a Bigfoot.
Yeah, this comes up a lot, and generally it's people that they think they're helping the poor little forest animals. You know, we've got extra food. What do you want to do with it? It's starting to go bad. Go throw it out by the wood line. Some critters will eat it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be a raccoon or something little like that that's eating it, or it could be one of those, let's take advantage of free food handouts and nab all of it for ourselves, Bigfoot that are doing it. And in more than one case, that's turned out to be what was going on. And when they quit dumping the food out, all of a sudden, they're getting their house slapped, things are getting turned over, they're hearing, growls and screams and all kinds of weird noises and stuff. Local Bigfoot not happy you're not feeding them anymore. And, and the people start freaking out. They don't even know Bigfoot was there. Well, what's suddenly messing with our house and making all this noise and stuff? They just have no clue.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I've heard stories also of people that are willingly habituating them, and then for some reason they get sick or they have to go to a hospital or they have to go out of town, and they'll come back to just a demolished home. It's like terrible. So they don't take kindly to that. They take it as a very personal affront when you haven't put out the feed bin.
Exactly. Well, and that's why I've had a few conversations with natives about this, and we sort of look at it as it's not so much that they think they're getting a handout from you as they think it's tribute, like you owe this to them. And if you're not handing it over, they get mad.
Right, yeah. You're paying for our silence.
Yeah, that's it. We're not going to mess with your house as long as you're feeding us. But if you quit feeding us, we're going to make you miserable.
Because we know where you live.
We know where you live, exactly. And we know that's where the food's coming from, and give us more food. I need a Snickers bar.
Exactly. Now, we got a question in the chat it's not really related, but it's kind of related to the discussion tonight in terms of Smithsonian intervention and interference in the history as we know it. And this is from Pam PR in the chat, and she says, hello to Duke. Can you ask him about the Grand Canyon Egyptian finds in 1909 and David Hatcher Childress' book saying it was taken by the Smithsonian also?
Yeah, there's big areas of the canyon that are still off limits to this day that have mysteriously Egyptian names on all this stuff in them. And you got to question that when there's a big part of the canyon that's off limits to go into, and it's got all these weird Egyptian names. What's going on there? As far as David Hatcher Childress goes, I really like his stuff. I've been following and paying attention to what he's doing for a long time, and I recommend it.
Yeah. He's, of course, I became aware of him. I think it's from Ancient Aliens, same guy, right?
Yeah, he does all this kind of weird alternate history, conspiracy, aliens, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. He's kind of peripherally involved in the whole giant research thing. The guys like Tom Horn, Tim Alberino, Gary Wayne, Steve Quayle, they're all involved in. So he overlaps into that sort of thing too. So, you get this sort of crossover Bigfoot stuff. He's mostly weird archaeology, out of place artifacts sort of guy.
Yeah, we just did a show about that the other night, and just the whole idea of the out of place artifacts is just incredibly, it's incredibly humbling to think that, there's so much going on that we don't know about. And of course that's the same for the giants and the Bigfoot and all of that is this modified version of the history of our world. And I just think that if we knew in, 5 minutes from now, everything that's ever happened here, we would just have to go scrape our underwear. That'd be like it. It'd be like, oh my God, seriously? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of that, here's a really short thing that I wanted to read for you guys.
Sure.
On the subject of the Yosemite. This comes from Bigfoot, The True Story of Apes in America by Lauren Coleman. I like his stuff. He does really good archive research on all this stuff and comes up with really obscure stuff. And this is one of those books that is worth having because he doesn't go into super detail, but he has like zillions of sightings and reports and stuff in this one book. And this one for fans of Dave Paulides' Missing 411, you may sit up and take notice to this because you'll be aware that there is a giant cluster of missing person sightings in Yosemite.
Right.
Why is that? Well, could have something to do with the Yosemite people. Let me read this to you. Yosemite, it should be noted, has its own dark side. During the Yosemite Indian War of 1851, Mountain Man Jim Savage would discover the Yosemite Valley and name it after a word he thought meant grizzly bear. He thought that. But as Carlton Smith points out in Murder in Yosemite, Savage got confused from the origins of the word Yohemity. It has nothing to do with bears, but refers to a shadowy group of, quote, people, unquote, that pursued the Indians living in the valley. The Miwok word Yohemity is really tied to their true characterization of these elusive enemies, and what it literally means is, quote, some among them are killers, unquote.
Oh. Wow. That is amazing.
So, yeah, Yosemite, no, don't go there.
Or don't get out of your car if you do.
Yeah, or don't get out of your car. Well, this comes up a lot. You know, a lot of these areas that are like wilderness areas, national parks and stuff were areas that the natives shunned for a reason. That's why they weren't living there either.
And that holds true for even things like, you know, Devil's Mountain and you know, if like Cindy, who was just on the phone, she lives right on the basically at the foot of Hoodoo Mountain. I mean, hoodoo, for God's sakes. You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, that's not suspicious at all.
Right, but and Devil's Lakes and Devil's this and that, and those names come up all the time. And I'm pretty sure that in most of those cases, those are references to warnings from the native tribes, you know, of stay out of those places, stay out of this place. It's, you know, evil dwells here. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, it's Devil's Ridge, you know, or whatever. I think that our ancestors used the name devil in place of, you know, as of a general warning because there wasn't any way to disseminate information. But if you slap devil on it, it's like, okay, everybody knows that. You know, you don't want to go there. Right.
Well, you got two things going on. I mean, if you go up like northern Minnesota and around that whole area and along the border and whatnot, you have lots of things that are named Wendigo and Wendigo.
Right.
Which is, again, you know, one of those names. And they're still named that because the name is still popular, it's stuck or whatever. And then you got areas over in the Pac West especially where they've retranslated the original Indian names for stuff and they try to do their best translation of it. And, you know, some of these, one in particular, I can't think of which tribe or what exactly the word is, but their name for Bigfoot basically translates to mountain devil.
Oh, yes.
So if they named it Mountain Devil Lake or something, it's going to get translated as Devil Lake.
Right. Very true. That's right. I'd heard that as well. Yeah, I mean, so if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you're here, if you're planning on camping on Devil's Lake, don't.
Yeah, there might be a reason why it's named that. One thing I wanted to share with all you guys before we run out of time here, one of my favorite books, and for those of you that are interested in mountain giants, you have to own this book because it's practically the only book out there that has anything to do with them. And again, Lauren Coleman had his fingers in this one. It was co-authored Mark A. Hall from Minnesota. And it's called True Giants, Is Gigantopithecus Still Alive? And what they did is collected reports, not only from North America, but from all over the world of these, you know, is this a Bigfoot or is this a giant? Because it's kind of too big to be a Bigfoot, and it doesn't really match up with a giant. What are these things? Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that got me interested in the whole mountain giant thing, because they're, you know, they sort of lump them together, whether some of these reports seem to be like actual giants and other ones are mountain giants. But my favorite, most interesting one in here is a gentleman who actually got kidnapped by a mountain giant.
Oh, God. Wow.
And let's see. The author says, I did hear a Western Washington State native man, middle-aged, once say, and this is important, the Sasquatch one typically sees, huge as they are the juveniles. And they're the only ones ever sighted because as young'uns, they're not yet shrewd enough to conceal themselves from humans 100% of the time. The adults, he said, are never seen and are unimaginably huge, 12 foot tall or something. That was a new one on me, he says.
Oh my God.
So there's that. And then here's the an early account from Oregon tells us something of how mountain giants were living in that region at the time. According to the research of Sidney Warren, the front page of the Salem, Oregon Statesman in 1857 contained the account of a young man who encountered a mountain giant. He was carried out to the concealed home of the giants, the cave in the mountain forest of Oregon, and after a short stay, he escaped to tell the story. The story was told by one who had set out with an older man to look for some lost cattle. Overtaken by darkness and weariness, the two had laid down to rest. After midnight, the boy, however, was awakened by a cry. He rose and walked in that direction. As Warren tells it, quote, he observed an object approaching him that appeared like a man, about 12 or 15 feet high, with glaring eyes, which had the appearance of equal balls of fire. This is the eye glow thing again.
Right.
The monster drew near to the boy, who was unable from fright to even move a single step, and seizing him by the arm, dragged him forcibly away towards the mountains, over logs, underbrush, swamps, rivers, and land, with a velocity that seemed to our hero like flying. They had traveled in this manner perhaps an hour when the monster sank upon the earth, apparently exhausted. Our hero then became aware that the creature was indeed a wild man, whose body was completely covered with a shaggy brown hair, about 4 inches in length. Some of his teeth protruded from his mouth like tusks. His hands were armed with formidable claws on his fingertips, but his feet, singular to relate, appeared natural, being clothed with moccasins similar to those worn by the Indians. And again, here's where it comes into mountain giants seem to have better technology. The giant kept his grasp on the boy's arm and continued on as before. In the wilderness, he finally stopped and let out a shriek that shook the forest all about them. The cry was a signal to others to open the entrance to this concealed tunnel system. Quote, immediately after which the earth opened at their feet, as if a trap door, ingeniously contrived, had just been raised. Entering at once this subterranean abode by a ladder rudely constructed of hazel brush, they proceeded downward perhaps 150 to 200 feet when they reached the bottom of a vast cave, which was brilliantly illuminated with a peculiar phosphorescent light, and water trickled from the sides of the cave in minute jets. The boy was, that's unquote here again. The boy was taken into the cave and the entrance was sealed. While in the cave, the boy observed a scene between the giant and a young Indian woman who had been apparently held captive for a long time. The woman was able to pass a note to the boy that advised him to flee or he would be devoured. The boy climbed the ladder to the sealed trap door and dug furiously to free himself. He possessed a utilitarian Russell Barlow knife that aided his efforts. After slipping through a hole to the surface, he encountered a small group of miners who were prospecting on the headwaters of the southern Umpqua River. He told his story and was directed to civilization. At first, of course, when the boy returned to his family, they were doubtful. But he was known for being modest and moral, so his story was given some credit among them. And this account goes a long way toward explaining what they were doing and how they concealed themselves in caves in the West, and in this case, living in the 1850s in the Cascade Range near Crater Lake, Oregon.
Wow. Jeez.
And yeah, there's several more reports like this. One thing that comes up a lot, and in apparently the native legends where they have these things in these areas, is that when they're walking around at night, they sort of announce their presence. They'll make this really high-pitched, shrill whistle sound. So if you hear that at night, don't go investigate.
Stay away. Stay very far
Stay away, or you might end up in their cave in their cooking pot.
It sounds like something out of Grimm's fairy tales or something. But it's the whole idea that I guess we can be on the food chain in more ways than one. But my God, so has anybody? What time period was this from again? I'm sorry.
1850s.
1850s. So has
same time period as all the deaths over in the Bitterroot, the Bauman incident, all that sort of stuff was going on. But this was further west over in Oregon.
Wow, that just totally cooks my bacon, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it's bad enough getting nabbed by a Bigfoot and hauled off. How would you like one of these 15-foot tall, glowing-eyed giant monsters to haul you off? Geez, no thanks.
Well, especially since, there's no good stories of those, There's no good stories of, gee, I met this giant and he was really nice. It was, gee, I saw this giant and, he got ferocious and dragged me off to a cave,
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a good story.
No, and, apparently not some kind of a friendly critter. It's like all these other stories about giants. Well, they don't like humans and they want to eat you.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, you'd swear they had some bad history with us or something.
yeah, maybe like at one time all the tribes in North America were warring with them, trying to get them out of here.
Yeah, geez, talk about carrying a grudge, for God's sakes. Well, that's crazy, though. I don't know, man.
Yeah, carrying it for a long, long time, apparently.
So you and I were also discussing when we were planning the show, or what things don't you do to piss off a Sasquatch? What do you do not to piss off a Sasquatch? Or what should you not do if you don't want to piss off a Sasquatch?
Right. Well, take hints that they give you, first of all. If you're in an area that maybe you shouldn't be in and they're making a racket and throwing things at you, this is like their subtle way of saying, get out of my area. Mm-hmm. And take their advice and leave the area. If you continue to be boneheaded and try and, like be willful and do something they don't like, you're really asking for it, because they do not have long tempers. That's one thing that comes up in all the Bigfoot reports over and over and over again. They get mad really easy. They got short tempers like a 5-year-old. Mm. So better to not push it. The other thing is that apparently they have a lot in common with the great apes. They seem to react to facial expressions and stuff more like a great ape would and less like a human would. So if you're walking down a path and all of a sudden there's a Bigfoot standing on the trail in front of you staring at you, what do you not do? Well, don't turn around and run. Turning around and running triggers their instinct to chase you. And yeah, they might be more like us and think more like we do, but that's no guarantee they're not going to just react instinctively and chase you down because, it's fun, and slam you into the ground and, oh, you died. Oh, well. The other thing is that, just like the great apes, there's signs of dominance and signs of submission. So if you see one, he's giving you the glare, don't look directly in his eyes. Avert your gaze. Do not stare directly in his eyes. Just like a gorilla or something like that. If you're staring in their eyes, that's a challenge. Mm-hmm. You're challenging them. Super bad idea. Another thing is if you decide to try and play I'm your friend and give him a big grin, don't show him your teeth. Oof. That's another thing primates do. When they're getting ready to tear you to pieces, they'll flash you the teeth. This is one of the weapons in my arsenal that I'm about to use to rip you to pieces. Get out of here. Mm. So if you're going to grin at them, and apparently, according to what I've been able to gather, they do understand what a smile is and that it's a friendly gesture, but God, don't show them your teeth. If you're going to grin, just give them a grin. Don't let your teeth show. So that would be another good one to remember.
Wow. Now, I've also heard through the years about people urinating on stuff can piss them off. Have you heard that as well?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And this, if you ever find some big tree structures or something, do not defecate or urinate on or near them. Again, you're challenging them. This could be a territorial marker, and you're going up to their no trespassing sign and shooting it with your shotgun is the way they're going to take it.
Okay. Now, I do have a question as well. Say you're out in the woods, you start noticing the broken trees and twisted trees. What does that mean?
As far as all the tree structures goes, nobody's 100% sure what it all means. Some of them we've got a fairly good guess on. Leaners and stuff, they seem to mark territories with that. They habitually twist and break branches, limbs, and, smaller trees and stuff when they're going past. And the ones that we've been finding around here and trying to vet this and follow them around, invariably it does point to something else. So these apparently are trail markers in some cases, especially the twist snaps, where if you go the direction that the thing is snapped over, you'll run into something else. Just follow a straight line, and you'll run into it.
Okay. Now, one thing that had occurred to me, and of course it's just a hypothesis, but, as with all things cryptid related, any hypothesis is as good as any other. But, I think in bears, when they do their scratching and stuff, they try to get up as high on the tree as they can because that's a visual warning to other bears that the one that's here can be this tall, and if you're not that tall, do not enter.
Yeah, and that's why bears have those scratching posts that they use in their territory. It marks it that A, there's a bear here,
Right.
and B, it's a big bear because here's how high up the tree he's ripping with his claws.
Right.
So the other bears can see that and go, yeah, there's a bear here. He's a big bear. I'm not that big. I'm leaving his area.
Yeah.
Before they run into a problem.
So I was thinking about the size of the snaps and the twists and the breaks. Could that also be a visual demonstration of here's where we are and here's how strong I am. So stay the hell out if you can't do this too.
Yeah, well, it could be. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that some of that is probably that, but you see twists and snaps on everything, from quarter-inch little branches all the way up to, like foot-thick trees. So I don't think that's necessarily a territorial marker. The ones that we're leaning toward falling into that category would be X structures.
Okay.
Which, again, we think pretty much all of them will make X structures. They'll probably just like, monkey see, monkey do, copy what the alpha is doing. He's making this thing. The Squatch, let's make our own little version of it. We'll back them up, and they sort of make the same thing.
Okay.
Or they're just in an area and they get bored, so they put some little structures together or something. What does seem to be the case is that the really big X structures may be markers from the alpha in that territory. Mm-hmm. Because we found some X structures that were just tremendously gigantic. And from what we've been able to gather, and this is mostly from word of mouth from native legend and whatnot, that it's the alpha that's making it. He's not getting help from anybody else in the troop, and he's trying to make the biggest X structure that he can, just like the bear, to mark that I'm this big. Look at how big the tree structure I made is. Don't, unless you think you're bigger than this, you shouldn't be in my area.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like it would be a visual display now. One other quick question I have. We're down to about 3 minutes. Do they do the rock piles, the stacking and balancing of rocks, or is that just something hikers are doing as they pass through?
Well, there's definitely hikers doing a lot of that. And you'll find that out in the middle of nowhere where you got some long-range hiker that's put up little rock stacks and stuff, and you'll find them for trail markers and stuff. Now, natives used to do this for trail markers, too.
Oh, okay.
From what I heard, did they get it from Bigfoot, or did Bigfoot get it from them? Because apparently Bigfoot also do this. And apparently the only thing that I've heard that seems to be fairly consistent is that they will put rock markers near their favorite fishing rivers. And what they'll do is they'll put a big flat rock on the bottom, which, we're guessing apparently indicates the alpha. And then they'll have smaller rocks piled on top of it, one for each member of the troop, to tell you how many troop members are there. So they basically got the river marked. If another Squatch shows up, it'd be like, oh, there's already a troop fishing here. I better not fish or I'm going to get in trouble, sort of thing.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. So again, we're about at the tail end of the show here, brother, but it's been an epic journey, of course, but let those of you who may not be familiar with World Bigfoot Radio know how to keep in touch with you.
Yeah, if you guys are interested, I have to go to YouTube and type in World Bigfoot Radio, and you'll find all the shows and whatnot, hopefully. Otherwise, you can go to my channel, Brian Sullivan, and I'm also on, my support group is on the MeWe social network, if you want to come over and join that at World Bigfoot Central. And I should have my website finished here shortly. I've been having problems with that. The webmaster who's helping me with it has been having lots of at-home problems that he's been dealing with, so it's been a slow process, but that's pretty close to being done. It'll be worldbigfootcentral.com. And if anybody wants to drop a line, you can get a hold of me at worldbigfootcentral@yahoo.com.
Excellent. And thank you so much, brother, for being here tonight. I know it was short notice, but I'm so thrilled that you were able to be here, and it's been an amazing journey.
No problem, buddy. I don't get to be the guest on a show very often. I usually have to be the master of ceremonies and interviewing somebody else, so it's kind of fun for me to get a chance to just go on and go, well, let's discuss a topic. Here's all the good stuff I got on that, and be able to just present it. So I enjoy it, too.
Yeah, I'm sure we could discuss Bigfoot baked goods, and you can pull up a whole bunch of information. You just seem to have...
I really like sourdough biscuits, apparently. I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. But and thank you all of you out there who found the portal, whether by yourself or by reference from others, or if you happen to hear from us from Sasquatch Chronicles. I'm just really thrilled to meet all you new people and to see the numbers climbing. It's a real honor. I'm just thrilled and humbled. So thank you for becoming a part of the family as well. But please like the videos if you're enjoying yourself. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And I will be back tomorrow night, and Mr. Don Longbeard will be joining me, and we'll be whipping up some kind of hell here. You just know we will. So I hope you all are doing wonderful and have a wonderful night. Be good, be kind, be nice, take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to smile as much as you're able. So we'll be back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 7 days a week. There's always a portal happening. So love you all and have a great evening.
Don't hug the Wookiee.
Don't hug the Wookiee.
Thank God I survived that.
That's a good line.
Yeah, it's my favorite closing line. Don't hug the Wookiee. Especially applies to it.